So I'm saying that what's brutal about, so in nature you have checks and balances, and the people known as the Anunnaki, also Iroquois, were cited by Patrick Bay as being familiar with some of the principles that became the Constitution in the United States of renown. And one of the most sublime aspects of the Constitution would be the checks and balances. And then I think that nature is the same, like such as what I've said about like cause and effect, protecting our very our sexual potence in our life and death cycles, and also beings in the environment. But then also checks the I would say the youth is checked by experience, and experience is also checked by youth. So like a lot of things that are very that would be considered cool, fun, attractive, sexy, life affirmative, whether at the degree of an of actual like childhood and like being a member minority, or being a member of majority, being an adult but a young adult, is basically goes that the youth have say on what goes, what's cool, what's sexy, what's life. The realest things that have to do with life are more so reined in under what's youth and cool. So like you go online and you learn how to be more attractive and to have more success, like around like dating and like sex and stuff like that. And it's like, and you're being encouraged to talk dumber, to get dumber. Like this is, so you don't you went your whole life through school, you learn how to read and write, and you get to be adult and they teach you how to unlearn that. Like, no, we need you to write like this to be attractive in the text message. We need you to cut out all that other stuff and talk dumber and dumber and dumber. And that's not wrong, and that probably works, but it just shows that youth in itself is a check on experience, and youth has command over what goes, what's sex, what's not, what's cool, what's not. A lot of that is within the youth, but then the experience can also check that at the same time too. And sometimes we still have to people with experience have the ability to create the sensation of indignation. You're bogus because you did this, and you need to be corrected. And a lot of people who are youth, even as much as the youth give the people with experience a hard time, they will yet accept that indignation, sometimes maybe against their real better judgment or best interest. That, okay, yeah, so you have more experience and you say I'm bogus, so I must have to prostrate for you. I did this and that because I had to defend myself. In real time, I had a couple seconds to make up what might be the end of my existence, or my ability to survive. I had to make that up in real time, and somebody got hurt when I did that. But now you have more experience, so I feel bad about what I had to do to survive, because you're so experienced and your indignation makes me feel different about myself. So I'm gonna defer to you because of that. That's not necessarily in a person's best interest or better judgment if we're being organic beings. But it's the same way the other way, when someone who's a little bit more experienced. I'm in my 30s, and the martial artist John Jones has pointed out that sometimes men in their 40s, like when people go to high grade military training, the people in their late 30s and 40s whose body is mature and broken in can sometimes outdo younger people in physical terms, in the strictest physical standards. And a seasoned human being can outdo a younger human being sometimes. And I want to say that might be the same in the bedroom too, if I'm being a jerk. But all I meant to say is that we impose arbitrary standards going up on what a person who's older can and can't do, and we impose arbitrary standards going down on what a person younger can and can't do. And part of that has to do with our feudal understanding of linear time, and the duties and the limitations and abilities attended by an arbitrary standard of linear time. When I was a pizza driver, I had people I was working with in their young 20s that would smoke like a couple packs a day, and they would be in their their early 20s, maybe late teens, but more so early 20s, and I was already getting on to about 30. But because their driver's certificate, the driver's license says that they're younger, people would assume them to be more vibrant and vital and healthy and vigorous than someone mature, even though that person mature doesn't touch things like cigarettes. So that's just an example of how our linear sense of time can be arbitrary and not what a human being is capable of or not. But what I meant to say is that, so now you have people who are, say you're in your late 30s, or just your 30s or your late 20s, and your standard of being a sexual being sexual expression is one of the most substantial features of a human being's experience and also identity. So your ability to be procreative and to express yourself sexually is being held to the standard of someone much of people who are maybe younger than you, like I'm saying, like young adults, young women, and have less experience, and it can be very juvenile in a sense. So you have grown men being held to the standards of a younger person, a younger woman, which we could say that your brain is still developing. So even though you've crossed and you can vote now and you can drink alcohol now, from in a lot of senses, you're still yet a child, or not a child, but you're still yet juvenile, even as you're in these first years of being an adult. So one could be saying that you have adults being held to the standards of juveniles with things like what it means to be cool and sexy. And then also, I think that it's been said, and people such as Rollo Tomasi have made concise and cogent positions that a male and a female do not necessarily mature at the same rate, both in terms of their physical their physical potency and viability as sexual partners, what's bluntly and crudely called the sexual market value, is different. And the expression of dating is different over the timeline of a male and a female, where you can have a female who is just barely an adult, and she is sexually viable and attractive to a man of any degree and stature. And then you have a young male where you take that male at that same age, and he's not as viable to his a vast swath of partners at his young, as he's a young man. Nor is he as competent and seasoned in terms of his taste, his competence, his understanding, we really don't give ourselves enough patience to grow into what becomes our personality and our appeal. We think that because you hit the gate out of because you can't live with your mom anymore, and you don't go to your education isn't paid for by public education. Now you have all your swag right now. You have all your seasoning right now. You have all your strength right now. You have all your game right now. And I think that life knows better, and we learned the hard way that it takes more than that to be the best that we're capable of as partners, as men, as people. But it's a little bit different for a male and a woman, if we're being honest, because different things are required of us for different purposes. So a man can be getting on to his better years in 30s and beyond, and that's recognized by both I think by young women and also by statistics, like as far as like what's going on these God only knows what the metrics and the data are saying about the real baseball, about life behind our decisions online, but it is known somewhere. And I think that the numbers might go to bear that men and women can be reciprocal when a man is a little bit advanced, not elderly, but just a little bit advanced in life, and a woman is maybe younger in life, both being adults, but at different stages and points of development and maturation, both at an organic being, but also a psychological, emotional, and spiritual being. And so what I meant to say is that we live in the West, and it's very brutal now. It is brutal on all senses, and I think that the brutality is being stoked by the very matrix apparatus around the culling of our life force, not the least of which are sexual potence, and then our manner of living and dying, they are harvested by the matrix, but within that, and it is brutal, or ever more brutal. But we're being held to arbitrary standards, and maybe we're actually having women, sexually viable women, which may be a little bit juvenile. What it actually means to be viable as a partner might be a function of being somewhat juvenile. I'm not saying I'm not saying crossing statutory lines into majority and minority, but I'm just saying a younger like a younger female would be the most attractive, generally speaking, and also the most viable as a partner in terms of creating families. And also there's something called neoteny, which is that a lot of what makes a person attractive is somewhat what makes them look juvenile. That's why some of the bonding between like a parent and a child, not only human but other species, And then humans in general is that there's something called neoteny. I think like neonatal, like young baby. Neoteny is the youthfulness of something, not necessarily a baby in itself, but just the youthfulness and vigor is something that is attracting and compelling to not only humans but other creatures. And so with that, sometimes your younger people who may be more attractive, more neotenous, have more of a stamp and a say so about what goes, what's cool, what's sexy, but they're not the only ones who are actually sexually viable. So when you hold other people to that standard, it can be a form of brutality. And I think maybe the same might be true also if we had men decide what it means to be a woman. That I might actually be doing that myself right now when I'm saying that being young and sexy and vibrant is what it means to be a viable partner as a woman. That I'm actually doing the very thing when I say that, holding what is female maturation and viability to a male standard. And I can't help some of my own, we can't help some of our own blind spots, but I do recognize that I'm somewhat doing that with this. But what I meant to say is that part of when you throw everything out, when you throw things out the window with sexual liberation, that's I'm not saying that's bad or that it hasn't been enjoyable, but I'm saying it may not actually be working out for us in a lot of ways. And part of it are some of the standard is there's going to be some kind of standard, and what the standard has somewhat amounted to is having men defer to women for what it means to be a woman, and maybe women deferring to men for what it means to be a man. And I don't know that works in anyone's interest. Sometimes I see people. Another thing is that in order to you have to always mitigate supply and demand when you have a market of some kind. So people say sexual market this, sexual market that, but they might not actually think about how brutal that could actually be. Is that if we actually do have a sexual marketplace like it proliferates on online spaces, you would also have to you would necessarily have to mitigate supply and demand in such an environment. And so you may have people who are sexually viable at all dimensions of what it means to be sexually viable, organically, in terms of style, in terms of health, in terms of finance, in terms of stature, in terms of profession, on and on. And yet you need to destroy some of that in order to have a more potent product. So like a lot of restaurants are throwing away like hell a lot of food, and a lot of diamond companies throw away they withhold some of the diamonds that are on the market in order to keep the price of diamonds high. And it's also the same with our nuts. Is that there's a lot of people that are writing off people who are sexually viable and compromising what it means to have a healthy dynamic in different ways. I think the Matrix might be doing that. And that is part of what is making a lot of more so of winners and more so of losers. Is that it may be designed, is that I think the Matrix, it fundamentally skews opportunity and resources in itself. I would say it's a feeding trough, but the way that it has things to feed on is by skewing opportunity and resources fundamentally in sophisticated ways. What I would call digitalism, as brutal as capitalism, as brutal as communism, as brutal as feudalism, as brutal as slavery, as brutal as colonialism, is digital in the sophisticated ways of skewing opportunities and resources. And a big part of that is I don't know what you call that in farming, where you destroy some of the crop in order to keep the crop viable and lucrative and valuable. And I think that some of it is also with sexual viability and sexual partners, where some of the birth rates in the West might actually be a function of the matrix apparatus and a function of supply and demand that is a little bit more sophisticated, whether intentional or unintentional, direct or indirect. It still amounts to the same consequences, that a lot of beautiful experiences, families, partners, relationships are not existing because they are being I think they are being shorn off in some sophisticated form of supply and demand. So that why you have people like you probably have like people like having like tens and twenties and hundreds of beautiful experiences and partners, and then tens and twenties and hundreds of people having nothing. And it might be a function of holding one another to arbitrary standards, and also controlling supply and demand somehow. I don't know exactly how all that would work, but I would imagine that some of your influencers and engineers and some of these digital platforms might understand how that's actually taking place. But But I just meant to say that I don't, I myself am more so about free love than anyone. I actually don't believe in, I've looked into, polyamorous, I've looked into polyamorous communities, who can speak intelligently to polyamory. And I thought that there's a lot of beauty in polyamory, if it could be done tastefully and tactfully. Just so say where I'm coming from, and so sometimes like you have I'll talk. I'm friendly like with people of all genders and backgrounds, and I've kind of seen both sides of the spectrum where I've read a lot of works of India, or like I've read works of the East where they have like strict understandings about what's proper between a man and a woman, and they would say not to even so much as entertain the thought of a woman whatsoever, because you're all women are to be appreciated as the wives of another, and women are not to be addressed in conversation in privacy at any point. That's one understanding, but then that same understanding is also part of like similar to like circles of tantra, where there are love making and trysts and orgies, but these are also within the boundaries of a consecrated environment, and the normal roles of a caste distinction and class are cast off in these worship settings, but they are yet taken back on when people put their clothes back on from these. They're and I can't speak from experience, but from studying it, is that and this is like in this is before the 20th century, is that the boundaries of roles in class and stature exist prior to a orgy, but they are suspended in an orgy because the orgy is a form of worship in itself that transcends our normal class. And then, but yet, as the clothes come back on, the roles and the status comes back, so that this has not been profaned because it's consecrated and it's private, or if it's not private, so as is appropriate. But then, that's from that same understanding, is that in normal senses, a man is not to entertain conversation or thought of a woman whatsoever. That's different inside of worship, and then but then it's back when the worship has been completed. But then on the West, like I've looked into like polyamory, which might be similar to it might actually be an influence. It might have been influenced by tantric circles. If I'm being honest, I can't substantiate that, but I would imagine that a lot of polyamorous circles draw influence and oversight, or at least so they are substantiated by principles and realities of what has been tantra in other places or different places. But then that would be a more forgiving way of looking at men and women, is that it's all good, and we don't have to be restricted to these arbitrary lines. So in that sense, I have thought like that a lot. So I'll be friendly with women, and sometimes engage women in conversation, sometimes in private. I'm not trying to isolate or corner anyone, but I would be so bold as to have a conversation in private with the woman and be forthright and forthcoming, and not necessarily be trying to put on moves. But that can sometimes go over well, and sometimes that can go over as poorly as though we were in the strictest of times. And so some women would like to be everything that modern standards have. They would like all of modern. This is for men and women, myself included. Sometimes we would like all of our modern licenses and leniencies to be anything we would like to be or not to be. But then when it counts, we want it the old way, like so. Yeah, I'm this and that. I can go anywhere unattended, and I can do anything because I can do anything a man can do. But don't talk to me like that because I got a husband and he'll fuck you up, and I got to answer to him. So it's kind of like it's kind of just like anything goes and anything goes. So we have it as we kind of have it as we like it now, or we try to. And I think that might not actually work out for us. So even me myself, like if I'm gonna emulate what's done in tantric circles, or I'm gonna emulate what's done in a something somewhat prudish, like maybe Protestant approach, or I'm gonna do things like in a polyamorous approach, which might be the more appropriating way of all those, is that if I'm not going to take all that comes with it, good and bad, then I'm somewhat bogus for even fancying anything, and I'm going to get in trouble doing that. So sometimes I think I'm not saying that it's good to have the old school standards, and I'm not saying that it's necessary. to have. I'm not saying it's good to be conservative or liberal, but I think that maybe being something of both might be the biggest detriment, and the most disingenuous way to do things is that the rules don't. It's kind of like playing board game with a small like an immature person. Is that they throw away the rules and they do anything they want, but then when it suits them, and then they want all the rules back when it also suits them. And I think that's a lot of what we do in modern society. We try to have our cake and eat it too. So we have sexual liberation and anything goes, but you mess up and they're going to take you down through their downtown, and that judge is going to come on you as strict as like those old judge that had like the somewhat fake hair like I do, like in the old days, like in the old colonial days, and they got the hair like that. That hair was cool. I still think it's cool as contraband. But they're gonna put the hammer down on you as cool as their wigs are, and just like we were back in the day. So it's whatever now. That's the best way to say this whole video. It's whatever, but it doesn't always work out. So I'm just trying to be open minded and share food for thought. But again, I salute anyone if you can find love, if you can find enjoyable experiences with other human beings, and bond with people. Whatever it takes to do that, I salute that, and whatever comes with that, I also salute that, and I wish you respect in walking that out, because we have to walk out our decisions, for better or worse. We have to take what comes with them and walk them down. So whatever love means to you, I salute that, and I still think holding hands is deeper. You know, like you can talk about like all the like the freaky stuff. You can listen to the songs from the 90s and I Want to Freak You and all that stuff. But I think what's actually colder and what's more intimate and what's also more humbling is to just hold hands in public, or to hold hands maybe in private too. That might be the colder thing right there. There's something that's so deep about like shaking hands with another man, when like they would call it dap, but like when you see a handshake between two people that mean it, like maybe like some people from the street. And sometimes when it's soft too, it doesn't have to be like all this stuff, but sometimes when it's just soft like that, like that really means something. That's almost as real as our word right there. I would say our handshake is as real as our word if we think about it. And sometimes these very soft handshakes are so deep. I saw these men in Afghanistan, some rebels in Afghanistan, and when they greeted each other, they put their hand on each other's heart. I think they actually might have appropriated that in the film. What's that film? It's the outer space one. Avatar. In Avatar, they were like putting each other's hands on. They're putting each other's hands on their heart, and I think they may have appropriated that, and it didn't look cool in that movie. To me, that movie, it looked way too try hard. But when I saw it in like a documentary about Afghanistan, and these men, like they've been through hell already, and they're about to go through more of it, like with faith and a smile, and then they put their hand on each other's heart like that, and that's cold right there. That means something. And so I think it's similar with like with handshakes in the street when it's real, and it like the softer handshake is the realer thing. But then also with a woman is that holding a woman's hand softly might be the most intimate, the deepest form of intimacy. I think you think I had a trainer when I was a driver, and she showed when I was first becoming a school bus driver, but I was actually driving a van that's a Type 3 van. It looks like your Amazon vans. And the woman who trained me showed me a training of a motorcycle. She fancied motorcycles, and this person was teaching that there's a lot more skill that goes into riding a motorcycle. And one of them is that the eyes, wherever your eyes go, your hands are going to mimic and follow behind whatever your eyes do. That's why when you're on the road and your eyes drift and then the car drifts, it's not just that the car drifts and your eyes had drift, it's that your hands followed your eyes, and that's why the car drifted. Our hands are connected to our eyes in profound ways. So they say that the eyes are the windows to the soul. But I think equally there might be another pole. All things in the body have a pole, so it exists on a pole. So because this reality is polarity. So maybe as the eyes are the window to the soul, so are the hands the window to the eyes and also the soul. So your hands mirror your soul. Also, if you observe someone's hands, you can see a lot of what they're thinking, and I think that's why it's so deep to hold someone's hand. I remember when I was a little kid, I got to hold the hand of one of my teachers on a field trip, and I was in seventh heaven right there. And she was like trying to figure out like how to like get rid of my holding her hands, like without like being mean spirited about it, but how that was so deep, holding the hands of this teacher that I thought was so cool. When we were walking like on a field trip,